Good morning, Amy Jacobson in here. I'm up in here, excuse me. John Anthony here as well, filling in for Dan Prof today. Thanks for coming in.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
And we want to thank again everyone who went out on Saturday
Yes.
to our event, which was organized by Jessica Hackett, also known as
Emma Woodhouse.
on Twitter. You should follow her. She is a very smart woman, and she does the research every day. I got to tell you,
and great research.
Yes, so you have to follow her on Twitter, that's for sure. So last week I asked Governor Pritzker, as I do always, because I'm single issue right now. I want to get our kids back in school, back playing sports.
Amy, I know that you keep reporting that somehow we've closed schools. I have not closed schools. So that's just that's a fallacy.
I know it's up to superintendents.
It is, and all across the state, parents, teachers, local school councils have made decisions for themselves based in part upon how rampant the virus is in their county, in their area, based in part on how rampant it is among the people who attend that school or their families. And I think for the most part, school superintendents, the school councils, parents, faculty, et cetera, have been responsible about that. We have many people who are learning from home because that's what their communities felt was right to do. We also have many people who are in hybrid situations, which for some works very well. And then there's a smaller portion that are going to school every single day, because that's what they've deemed to be safe. But we're not keeping people from having school.
Yeah, but you are the governor, and you could demand better. If you are able to shut down all the restaurants and bars, you are able to demand that all superintendents reopen Illinois schools. So there is no reason. And now that, the cases are going up because they changed the rules, now they're counting the antigen tests. Because cases are going up, everyone freaked out, because I can't find a school district that didn't freak out, and everyone back to remote learning. Even your school district, right?
They're back in remote learning. But
what was the reason they gave you?
They didn't. Well, I don't recall reading a reason. I believe some kid came down with COVID, but they just came down with it. So
you just take the people that were around that child, self-quarantine for now it's 7 to 10 days instead of 14 days.
Which is what the IDPH manual dictates, but they've completely changed and moved the goalposts to determine how this now is handled. And that's just it. I was talking to Congressman Mike Boss. He said back when they were when this was becoming law, right after 9/11, one of the guarantees was that the governor must come back to the General Assembly after 30 days. He couldn't. I'm looking to try to get the actual floor debate and talk about this on my show, though. Actually.
Okay, which is black and right here on WIND on Saturdays from 1 to 3 p.m. So there is a plan. CEO Janice Jackson came out. She gave an interview to Fran Spielman about reopening schools, and that they want to reopen on January 11th for preschoolers and kids with special needs. And then in February, they want K through 8. Not part of that conversation, though, is high schools, which I know. I have 2 high schoolers. Why am I paying taxes? And so that's a problem. With more on this, let's welcome back to the show our good friend, Paul Vallas. Good morning, Paul. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Morning.
Good. So what do you think of the plan to get kids back in school at CPS?
Oh, it's ridiculous. First of all, schools should have opened like the Archdiocese opened in September. Parents were afforded the option of learning remotely or having their kids in school. I think their attendance rate of in-school learning has been about 85%. They haven't had any serious problems. Of course, this convoluted plan to just bring preschool kids and special ed kids back in January and then try to work gradually getting the K-8 kids in school in these hybrid systems. I mean, they're not much better. The serious damage is being done having these children spending too much time learning remotely. All the research points to a disaster that remote learning is. And then, of course, having 100,000 plus high school kids on the street. Think about it for a second. Since the first of the year, 103 through November 10th, I don't have the updated data, 103 students, 103 young people, 19 years age and younger, have been murdered on the streets of Chicago. I think there have been 4 COVID-related deaths. You don't think having those children on the street, those young people on the street, aren't putting them in harm's way? So it's just ridiculous. Union, all they're doing is caving to the teachers union.
And speaking of the teachers union,
yeah, tell them that tweet. I don't know if you saw it.
I don't know if you saw this tweet, but the Chicago Teachers Union pushed this tweet out. The push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny.
Oh my God!
You have all. Paul, I would love to get your response to that, Paul.
Yeah, look, what's
God.
more racist? I mean, think about it for a second. What is more, you want to talk about racism or you want to talk about institutional racism? Well, what about denying poor families educational choice?
Right.
What about forcing poor families or limiting poor families' options to simply remote learning? All the research points to the damage remote learning does. All the research points to the overwhelming adverse impact remote learning has on working families. I mean, you want to talk about discriminating against Black and Latino families who comprise the overwhelming vast majority of children in the Chicago public schools? Only 1 in 6 Black and Latino families can work remotely. Who are you punishing? I went online the other day, Amy, and I was looking at this website that looks at unemployment throughout the country and breaks it down by cities and income groups. 34% drop in employment for low-income families. 34%.
Wow.
Where middle-income families and upper-income families, the employment has remained, it's kind of rebounded, it's remained now relatively the same since January. Who's being punished by the closing of the schools? Who's being traumatized? Low-income families, the majority of whom are Black and Latino. That's the family. Those are the families that the Chicago public schools serve. Those are the families that the teachers union, by their obstinance and by their arrogance, are punishing.
So is the only way our kids could go back is if Governor Pritzker or Lightfoot said, either you come back or you're going to lose your jobs. Because New York City, death capital of the world and of the United States, they've been back at school. What they have 1,500 students? Or no, more than that. How many students do they have? Not 1,500.
Oh, my God, 1 million.
1.5, yeah 1.5 million students. And they're making it work. And they even he wanted to go back to remote learning. And it was the parents who put the pressure on de Blasio and the teachers union to get them back in school. And he listened.
Well, first of all, Amy, all the research points out to the fact, all the science and now the experience, not only here but internationally, points to the fact that when you reopen schools don't become these virus hotbeds. The kids, first of all, aren't getting sick. They're not at risk, minimal risk. And, of course, they're least likely to be contagious. So all the research that has been done shows that there's not this rapid spread of the virus when you reopen schools. In fact, Governor Cuomo, of all people, said that schools are probably the best and safest place for children. The governor of Rhode Island, who's been as aggressive as Pritzker about shutting down the economy, has basically said we're not going to shut down schools. Right. Schools will be the last to shut down. And the same thing in Europe. The same thing, Boris Johnson said he's never going to shut down schools again. Yeah. The bottom line is, and you speak to New York, when the infection rate spiked to 3%, and de Blasio initially said we're going to shut down schools, the infection rate during that period for schools was 0.074%. And, of course, the parents said, no way, these schools need to reopen. So it's hogwash.
Yeah.
The public is being BS'd on this. Yep. And look, the teachers aren't getting laid off. They're not getting their salaries reduced. They're not getting their days furloughed. At the end of the day, they're getting paid. They're getting their step increases. They're getting their seniority increases. The bottom line is it's the public that's suffering, and the poor working families suffer the most.
Yeah. Hey, Paul, I don't know if you heard the video that Amy played right before you came on, but it was her questioning Governor Pritzker about, he's saying he didn't shut down schools. But if you were still at the Chicago system, how would you handle it? Because he's saying that all the power lies at the superintendents and things of this nature. So how would you have handled it? Would you open up Chicago public schools in fear of his threats? Because everybody that's gone against him, he's threatened them with taking licenses and all this type of stuff. So how would you open up Chicago public school systems? And because I think all it will take is one school to buck the system, and I think you'll start seeing other people being more free to do so. I should say.
Yeah, well, let me respond by saying Pritzker should have ordered that the schools be open, just as he ordered that the schools closed, if you remember, Amy, back in March. So at the end of the day, he could have easily, like other governors, basically said, I'm sorry, schools are open. You need to come up with safety plans, get with your health. So, it's an abdication of leadership, of responsibility. It's really easy to say we're going to leave it to local control. And would I have opened the schools? Absolutely. When the unions threatened to strike a second time, as far as I'm concerned, if I ever needed an excuse to get out of that teacher's contract that's going to pay teachers, that's going to cost taxpayers $1.5 billion and make teachers among the highest paid teachers in the country, that would have been a time to do it, because basically I would have said, look, fine, you can use your sick days and vacation days, but schools are reopening and we're not going to repay you, or we're not going to pay you if you don't come to work unless you have pre-existing conditions, unless you're in a certain age group or you have certain health care issues. Nobody's saying we want to bring people back to work and put them in harm's way, and nobody's saying that we don't want to open schools safely. But let me tell you, you've got 665 schools in Chicago Public Schools, all closed. Visualize this: 100,000 high school students walking the streets in some of the most dangerous communities in the country. Almost record homicide rates and shootings this year. Well, why in the world are you closing all the schools? When unions claim that, oh my God, the schools are unsafe. Are all of them unsafe? Do all of them have physical limitations? I mean, at the end, why not let the local school councils decide? Because they were left to decide whether or not they should have cops in the schools. Why not let the individual local school councils, the parent-led local school councils, make decisions about their schools individually?
Paul, that's a great point. We're going to take a break here, but when we come back, we want to continue our conversation with Paul Vallas.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
I'm Dan Proft.
And I'm Amy Jacobson. And if you're a small business owner or you make the marketing or advertising decisions for a business, then listen up. Once again, our annual Food for the Poor campaign is underway to raise money to feed families in Latin America who are suffering because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our friends at Food for the Poor are working with partners on the ground at feeding centers to provide emergency food relief. And here's how your business can be part of the solution.
Become a Food for the Poor business benefactor. Just make a $2,500 tax-deductible donation to Food for the Poor, and AM 560 will give you 40 60-second commercials to air here on AM 560 The Answer between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. Monday to Friday at no additional cost to you.
To take advantage of this deal, just call Anjanette Natowski, 847-472-8951. Again, that's 847-472-8951, or go to 560theanswer.com/food for the poor. Oh, yeah. It's that time of year again. Come on, John Anthony, dance while I'm reading this wonderful Pajamagram commercial. Christmas, guys, and the new Midnight Fantasy Pajamas are here from our friends at Pajamagram, America's PJ experts for nearly 20 years. Seduce. Be seductive with a hint of lace, silky and smooth to the touch. I am talking about the Midnight Fantasy Pajamas. A dream come true for her and for you. She'll love the way they feel, and you'll both love the way they look. Come on, sing it with me. Warm her up and treat her to the ultimate fantasy Midnight Fantasy Pajamas. Jonna, you can get this for your wife, huh? Yeah. And right now, when you order today, you'll get a great deal. Free gift packaging. That means you don't have to do a thing. She's missed out on a lot this year, so give her the romance she deserves. Give her the Midnight Fantasy Pajamas and your free gift packaging today. Go to pajamagram.com. Christmas Day delivery guaranteed. Pajamagram.com and tell them Dan and Amy sent you.
AM 560 listeners, if you're like me, you're often pretty cynical towards commercials. I'm not really a fan of things being shoved down my throat. My name is Ryan, and if it's okay, I'll try to handle this commercial for our mortgage team more like a business transaction. I think we bring two things to the table that are big advantages and differentiators for you. And obviously, we want you to see those two things so that you'll use us, because then we make money. Advantage one is that we're lucky to have a direct lender advantage. Our company is set up to use its own money and make its own lending decisions within its own walls. There's no middleman. And often, this advantage allows us to get you a better rate, which then saves you monthly and lifelong money. Advantage 2 is our commitment to AM 560. We specifically chose this station because we think we share core values. And because we're invested here, you should feel confident you'll be well taken care of. We are United Faith Mortgage.
We pay your appraisal fees up to $500.
United Mortgage Corp, Melbourne, New York. NMLS number 1330. Ryan Vreck, NMLS number 65233. For all licensing information, go to nmlsconsumeraccess.org.
Balance of Nature's fruits and vegetables in a capsule, changing the world one life at a time.
I think for older people, I think they really need to understand that this product will give you the energy that you need to sustain throughout a day. Right now, I just can't hardly make it through the day if I don't start my day out taking 3 of each every day. Yeah, I'm a flag waver for the product. I believe in it. I know it's helping me. I feel I'm more satisfied that I've got my energy level for the day. And, for the last 2 weeks, I've been working over at my mom's house to get it ready to sell. It's just unbelievable. I guarantee you, if you saw me compared to the rest of the guys that are 74, you think them boys is ready for the couch. And I'm going strong all day long and have been for quite some time now.
Balance of Nature is now offering 35% off on any new preferred order. Go to balanceofnature.com today and use discount code Chicago.
AM 560, The Answer.
All right, joining us once again, Paul Vallas, former CEO of CPS, and he actually left CPS with a $1 billion surplus. You know that word surplus?
Oh.
Rarely used here in Illinois. So he's a bright
first
man.
time I've heard that thing. That's the first time I've heard it in a very long time.
Really? Yeah, surplus. So, Paul, we wanted to talk to you about public safety because carjackings in Chicago up 134% from last year. And I know that in our neighborhood we had 6 carjackings before noon one day, and they caught 3 kids. They're 15, 15, and 16 years old.
Yeah. Well, again, my point about 100,000 students being either home or on the street in communities that are gang infested, many of those students won't be returning to schools. Let me point out that the enrollment for the 17th year in Chicago Public Schools is down, never mind the fact that they have a record budget. But it's down, and it has declined this year 15,000. So where do you think those kids are going? Many of them are going to the gangs. But let me just speak to that for a second. Obviously, the murder rates are up, 54, 55%. Shootings are up. The same percentage in carjackings are up well over 130%. In fact, in November, the carjackings were up almost 300%. Yeah. And I'll tell you what's happening. While a lot of people want to blame it on COVID, and let me point out, that is it COVID or is it our response to COVID that is contributing to a rise in crime? Because 3 things that have happened that are having an adverse impact during this COVID period. One is the shutting down of the economy, 34% drop in employment for low-income families. So who's getting hit? The poor people in the communities who are already struggling, in the many violent communities. The second thing that's happening is obviously, having 100,000 kids on the street. And then the third thing that's happening is the, in effect, de facto defunding of the police, because Lightfoot did not fill 1,000 vacancies in the police department this year. She took up 614 positions out of the police budget for this coming budget year. And there are 1,400 fewer cops in the districts than there were back in March. That's according to the Inspector General's analysis. 1,400 fewer cops, and they have shut down all the area support teams. Those are the support teams, the gang, drug, and anti-gun support teams that are supposed to support the districts. So they've left some districts on certain nights, might have 10 officers and 1 sergeant, might have 2 patrol cars patrolling the entire district. So we wonder why we have clearance rates or I should say arrest rates on carjackings of 7.5%, or why we have clearance rates, arrest rates on shootings of less than 3%, and arrest rates on murders of less than 25%. They're not getting the criminals off the street.
My cop friend told me that many are juveniles who are doing these carjackings because they face less consequences.
Right.
So their bigger brother or cousin will say, "Hey, go carjack. We'll use the vehicle," and then you'll just get a slap on the wrist or maybe probation.
Well, when you have 7% arrest rates and we have 7% arrest rates for carjackings. I mean, it's even lower than the 17%, I think it is, clearance rates. 7% arrest rates. There are no consequences. That means people are not just getting, if they're even arrested, are they getting charged for carjackings? And you have arrest rates, not just the clearance rates, but arrest rates of what, 2-3%. For shootings, there are no consequences. You've got criminals on the street, and they're being released, and they're going back to the street.
Yeah.
So the police are being de facto defunded by not filling vacancies, by basically pulling cops from the districts, pulling these area support teams, and they're being expected to do more, with much, much less, unfortunately.
And Paul, you stole some kind of my thunder when talking about the police, but as of December 1st, 4 Chicago youth have died from COVID, but 99 have died as a result of homicide. That's 25 children dead for every from homicide for every COVID death. Are you? I mean, what's going on in the leaders' minds in the city of Chicago to deal with this? I mean, you just saw the other night hundreds of kids out looting and fighting in the middle of the street in downtown Chicago. A lot of it is because they're getting rid of a lot of these support systems. Think about that. One child, that's 25 dead children from homicide for every COVID death. What, Paul Vallas, what needs to be done?
Well, look, the first thing you can do is start to reopen the economy so people can go back to work. Because as I've mentioned ad nauseum, poor working families are being impacted the most, and they're being brutally impacted in every state, and in Chicago in particular, 34.7% employment drop among the poor working families. And many of these poor working families, if they can go back to work, you're talking about the majority of these families being led by a